how you doing? This is Zac Hill here with Game Time at the Tournament Center. Now, I sit at the desk, I do play-by-play coverage, I talk about Magic a lot, and one of the things that happens is you see cards flying over the place, and sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out what's going on. So I've taken a look at some of the games that happened yesterday and broke them down to look at some of the key decisions that affected big matches that happened this weekend. So we're going to take a look at 3 matches. The first is going to be Ari Lax versus Eric Froehlich, a match about tough choices. We're going to see how the choice to use a single removal spell turned the tide of the entire match. Next, we're going to look at Pascal Maynard versus John Cavalier, a match about good value. We're going to see that Magic's not always about big creatures and expensive spells, but sometimes about cheap, simple instants that can change the course of the game. And finally, we're going to look at Alex Majleton versus Yuya Watanabe, a match about a good old-fashioned slip-up. We're going to see players sling haymaker after haymaker at each other, only for the match to be determined by a very, very small mistake. So I've put together some clips of the players playing right now so we can break down those decisions and take a look at exactly what happened. Let's look at this first clip right now. We're going to see Ari Lax playing Poison against Eric Froehlich playing Jund. Now this matchup is about very small creatures. You see Inkmoth Nexuses here. Eric right now at 5 poison. You only need 10 points of poison to lose a game. So Ari's trying to position his Inkmoth Nexus through Eric's removal spells. And Eric really needs to kill all of Ari's creatures in order to win. This Inkmoth Nexus pumped up by Noble Hierarch right now. Eric has Ancient Grudge, which blows up artifacts. This is an artifact creature. He also has Lightning Bolt. We can see if he plays these in the right order, he's going to be able to clear the board. If he plays them in the wrong order, he might just lose. So this first Ancient Grudge, threatening to take out Inkmoth Nexus. Ari has Vines of Vastwood, though, which makes his creature untargetable to get through to 7 poison counters with the Noble Hierarch. What that means is that he's threatening a lethal attack next turn. So we saw Vines of Vastwood take care of the first Ancient Grudge. Let's go to the next clip. Now, you're looking at a very comparable game state. You still see the same 2 Inkmoth Nexuses. You see Froehlich, 7 poison counters right now with a Noble Hierarch. This second Noble Hierarch hitting the table makes this Inkmoth Nexus lethal. So Froehlich has to counter the Inkmoth Nexus on the attack. Tarmogoyf, very big creature, doesn't have flying though, so it can't block the Nexus. Now, we see again, Ari activating his Nexus exactly like he did last time, attacking Froehlich for lethal. He knows about this Ancient Grudge in the graveyard. Now, Froehlich has a tough choice to make. Froehlich has a Lightning Bolt in his hand. He can either cast that or flash back an Ancient Grudge. If he casts Lightning Bolt, he might get trumped by a removal spell. But on the other hand, Ancient Grudge, only hits these targeted. He ends up casting Lightning Bolt instead of Ancient Grudge. But what we see is a blighted agent from Lax's side of the board that can't be dealt with by the Ancient Grudge in the graveyard. So Froehlich, out of answers, in a deck devoted to answers, he's forced to cast a Bloodbraid Elf blind, hoping to hit yet another bolt or a Jund Shard from the blighted agent. It turns out that he does not. If he'd have cast Ancient Grudge instead of Lightning Bolt the previous turn, he would have still had a removal spell for the agent. The game would have gone to him instead of Ari Lax. A single decision turning the tide of the game, and that's exactly how tight these matches are at the Pro Tour. All right, let's take a look at the next match now. We've got a totally different matchup. We've got John Cavalier versus Pascal Maynard. Again, if we can take a look at the next clip, totally different matchup. We're seeing limited play right now. Now, Pascal has a ton of permanents on the board, and Cavalier trying to use Launch Party to get rid of that Asperia Sky Knight, which is a big threat right now. Now, he has to sacrifice a creature to do so. Pascal deals with this for a single mana, as we're about to see with Amizium Skin. That's what this card right here is. And that's exactly what he does. He keeps his creature alive. Now, these blue instants are going to be a huge part of this match if we can take a look at the very next clip. Now, we see Launch Party being used to try and clear out flyers in that last clip. That's what we're going to see right now. Maynard has a huge threat in his hand. 7 mana flyer that can neutralize threats. Now, Cavalier not too sad right now because he has a Launch Party again. So again, he thinks he can remove the huge flyer. Again, he's going to try to do that, And again, he's going to be thwarted for a single blue mana. You see him readying his lands there. You see him figuring out how he's going to deal with this, how he's going to tap his cards. Another launch party fired. Immediately with the Dispel from Maynard. And that's going to cement the game. Now, if you're looking at this board state, it looks very convenient that he had one more mana open and just happened to be able to make that sequence of plays. So let's look at the very turn before, the previous turn to this on the next clip. Now, it's important to have discipline in a game of Magic. Keep in mind, this is the turn before. You see the threat in his hand. And if you look at the board, he has the 7 mana he needs to cast it. Now, normally you want to get a 4/5 flyer on the table as quick as you can. But what does he do? He just plays an Izzet Guildgate and says go, so that he can set up the Dispel, can protect his threat, can play around the launch party, and that one turn made all the difference and allowed Pascal Maynard to take the game. All right, so finally, let's look at our last clip and our last match. If this past match was about incremental advantages, this match is about haymakers. We see Yuya Watanabe against Alex Majleton. We see an Axebane Guardian block a 2/2. Huge amount of mana available to Watanabe. Alex casts a 3/3, and Yuya following up with a huge Sphinx's Revelation, gaining 6 life and drawing 6 cards. Now, normally, if you gain 6 life and draw 6 cards, it becomes very, very hard to lose the game. And we see him lay out those 6 cards there. Let's take a look at the next clip, though, because Majleton by no means out of gas. We see him array his lands right there. He untaps. He draws his next card. And without having to think too hard about it, he casts Collective Blessing, which gives all of his creatures +3/+3 and makes for a very dangerous and very lethal attack. We see him cast the Collective Blessing right here. Now, this turns out to be a pivotal moment for Watanabe, because Watanabe has a card in his hand called Avenging Arrow, and that kills any creature that is dealt damage this turn. The trick is, though, he has to cast it after the creatures have dealt damage, but before the turn ends. In the meantime, though, he has to make some pretty challenging blocks, and that's what we see right now. All of Majleton's creatures attacking for well over the 16 points of Yuya's life total. So Yuya has to figure out how to block. He's got a number of creatures right here. He's got a Gatekeeper Vine. It's going to become very important. You see this Axebane Guardian. Taps to add 2 mana. That plus this open Guildgate, 3 total mana to cast, if we can look at our next slide, the Avenging Arrow that's in his hand. So again, if we can go through to the next combat, we're going to see Yuya slam the Gatekeeper Vine on the blocker. We see the bird absorbing yet more damage to try and keep Yuya alive. Well, let's take a look at what happens next. And we see that something goes horribly wrong. Now, Yuya kind of kicking himself. You see him looking at his instance right there, trying to decide what's going on. It's very hard to get combats exactly right. And as he fans through his hand, you see the Avenging Arrow right there. You know this is what he's looking to cast. But if we can take a look at what happens next in the next clip, again, you see the Avenging Arrow cycling through this to the board state right now. It's not what happens. Even the best players in the world can make mistakes. You see him tapping his Axebane Guardian with a Gatekeeper Vine gone, untapping his land, tapping, untapping, realizing he no longer has the 3 mana he needs to cast Avenging Arrow, meaning he can't get any of these threats off the table with the card that he wants. Instead, as you see him look at his hand, he's got to cast Celestia Charm. What ends up happening as you look through the rest of this match is Majleton has exactly the amount of creatures he needs to end the game. So a single decision, a single slip up, a single match, not going for Watanabe, but falling to Alex. So that's just a small example of the tough decisions that these players have to make in game time. We'll see a lot more like that over the course of the tournament. I'm going to kick it back to Rich at the desk. I'm Zac Hill with Game Time here at the Tournament Center.